Hey guys, so I just got out of the shower, so you know what that means. Time for me to complain about things. Jokes aside, I think this needs to be said because I've been viewing the comments on Hey It's Maya's video about selling Luna for like a long time, and some of them are completely out of line and ridiculous, so I needed to make a video regarding that because there's a lot of people who hold those views and don't necessarily voice them, and there's tons of people who do and shouldn't. But first, I wanted to thank you guys all for your response to my mental health video. The response was amazing and I was not expecting it. I was definitely thinking that way more people would complain, and I'm also really happy to see that there's people in the comments who are connecting because they were going through similar things. Just really humbled by the response, so thank you guys. So first things first, my view on selling is that I'm entirely pro selling, provided that the seller is responsible. And this means that they actually care about where the horse goes and whether or not the new home suits the horse's individual needs. I support honest sellers who look to find suitable new riders and owners for their horses. Yes, of course, there are people out there that will be irresponsible and just won't care about where the horse goes, and they may lie to people who are coming to look at the horse, or they may just try to pawn their horse off to anyone regardless of what the home is like. It's not fair to condemn everyone for the actions of some. So we need to consider what each person is doing on an individual basis. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to talk about selling horses because I have a lot of opinions on this. And frankly, I do not care if you don't agree. You do not have the right to go and tell someone that they can keep their horse when they're saying that they have financial problems and time constraints that have led them to selling their horse. Okay, so even referring to a completely natural state when horses are living out in the wild in feral bands, they often do not stay with their natal band for life. The herd will change up pretty frequently, especially since the dominant stallion will usually run colts out of the herd once they hit a certain age, and fillies will oftentimes leave when they hit estrus, or they will. And now in captivity, the herds change up a ton too, because horses will get sold, they'll move barns, they'll get leased out. They'll get just moved to another paddock on the same property. People will decide to put their horses on stallboard. They're often not kept with the same horses for very long at all unless they're super lucky. And horses will bond more closely with other horses than they will with a human, especially when they're actually given the chance to. And now in the event where a horse isn't even allowed to naturally live in a herd in captivity, which they should have a friend, or they should at least be able to talk over the fence with other horses. This is not frowned upon at all by most people, but for whatever reason it's viewed as worse for someone to sell their horse than to keep it and have it live in isolation. Many of the people that I've seen get hate for selling their horses are selling highly marketable horses that should be fairly easy to find a home for. In the event that someone can no longer keep a horse that is not marketable, may it be due to lameness issues, age, or mental health issues that are making the horse super difficult to handle, I think in many cases it may be more responsible for the seller to euthanize the horse if they cannot find a suitable home for it. I know this is a touchy subject, but at the end of the day, if the horse is likely to end up in a really bad situation, I think that needs to be taken into account, and quality of life is way more important than quantity of life. Horses are very expensive, and even if someone intends to keep their horse for life, things can change pretty quickly that can result in it being impossible to budget for a horse. May it be time or money. No one can guarantee beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can keep a horse for life due to the expense of the horse, and the needs for yourself and your family will come first. In the event that a horse isn't even allowed the opportunity to socialize with other horses, this is oftentimes really normalized in the horse world, and it's viewed as okay, but selling a horse makes you an awful horse person, which is ridiculous. Horses are fully capable of bonding with and really liking their humans, but the fact of the matter is that socialization with other horses is far more of a necessity than with humans. Your horse needs to be with other horses far more than they need to be with people. It's just ingrained into them. They will be healthier and happier. It is a fact. Now, since the vast majority of horse people board out, we have to talk about the fact that people actively handling your horses when you aren't around will change up frequently. Stable hands will come and go. Different people will work different days of the week. This is viewed as fine, and I personally do think that it totally is, because your horses will adjust and they won't really care who's handling them so long as they're treated nicely and they're fed. But this really is the same type of idea as getting used to a new owner, since they're getting handled by different people each day, and they may get used to one person and then that person could quit and find a new job and they'll have to get used to someone else. They're already made to cope with different people handling them on a daily basis. Horses are also ridden by different people, maybe occasional rides from a professional or just a friend of their owner, or maybe due to the fact that they're being used in a lesson program or leased out a few days a week or more, a full lease, free lease. Yet again, this is far less frowned upon. Even in Maya's video, the one that I'm referencing, the comments that I've seen, people suggested full leasing her horse out over selling. This doesn't make any sense to me. How is that any different in terms of how the horse is going to view it? They're going to be taken away from their owner and they're going to have to adjust to a new person, handling them and riding them each day and move to a different barn. It's the exact same thing other than the fact that Maya would retain ownership, which would end up screwing her over if the lease were ended and she couldn't afford it. So leasing really doesn't make sense if it's a financial or time issue, because if you get the horse back, you're going to be put in a position where you cannot handle to keep the horse, and this puts you in a position where you're more likely to sell the horse and need to do so quickly, which means that the horse would be more likely to end in a not good home. So this really doesn't make sense to me, because you're suggesting something that's exactly the same from the horse's standpoint, but it puts the owner in a position where they could be made to keep an animal that they can't afford. So anyways, if you're pro-leasing, then you should be okay with people selling their horses, because your horse is still having to adjust to being handled by different people for several days a week or months or years at a time, depending on what type of lease it is. This is the same type of scenario as selling. If you're against the selling of horses, then you should have the same attitude towards leasing or having horses in lesson programs in which they would not even have the chance to bond with a specific person, because they're often ridden by several riders each week. Also, for whatever reason, these anti-selling people are okay with the purchasing of horses and oftentimes have bought a horse themselves or intend to do so in the future. How does it make sense to jump on people for something if you're okay with being the buyer, aka the exact person who removes the horse from the home and takes them to a new property and a new lifestyle? So selling and buying go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. If you're okay with buying, then you need to be okay with selling. It makes no sense. Without buyers, there would be no sellers, because they'd have no one to send the horse to. If you're actively condemning people for selling horses, I really hope that you're only acquiring horses through breeding them over generations of your family owning them, centuries at a time, which is very, very unlikely. And if not, then who the heck are you to judge people for selling horses if you've purchased them in the past or you intend to do so in the future? With this same logic, people should never go on vacations for extended periods of time, or go on medical leave, or go to university and leave their horse at home, because they're leaving their horse under the care of others, and this means that the horse is going to have to adjust to new people handling them, even if it's not necessarily for riding purposes. The entire mindset of this just blows my mind. I do not get it. It's completely and utterly ridiculous, because there is no sense to it, because there's a lot of situations that the horse would have to adjust to that would be the exact same thing as selling them. And comparing horses to dogs, and even in some cases children, is absolutely ridiculous. This is an insane mentality. First off, dogs are far, far, far cheaper to keep than horses. Even in the event of medical bills, dogs oftentimes are way more manageable for their medical bills than horses. Horse medical bills are completely outrageous, even if it's for something that is normal and something that you have to deal with on a yearly basis. My dog costs a fraction of what one of my horses would cost each month. Budgeting for my dog, even in times of financial stress, is something that is far more doable than it would be to budget for my horses. It honestly can't even be compared. The cost is so much different. And the time, too, is far easier to manage, because my dog lives in the house with us. Someone's around to feed him pretty much at every hour of the day and take care of him. We have people in and out of the house all the time that can keep an eye on him. And he needs way less exercise than what my horses would. He's happy going out in the yard and playing with his toys, or he's happy going for walks because he's older, short walks. For my horses, I'm spending hundreds of dollars each month, plus expensive vet bills and farrier bills on a routine basis throughout the year. The cost per year is far greater than what the vast majority of dogs would cost per year, and the cost can be higher or lower depending on where you live, because some places it's way more expensive to keep horses than others. So that's something that you also need to take into account. For driving alone to go visit my horses, I have to spend 30 minutes each way to get there. And that's a lot of time. It's very time consuming. That's not even taking into account the time that I put into riding them and the amount of work that I have to do to keep them and afford to keep them. Now, relating horses to the parent-child bond is even more ridiculous than comparing them to dogs. Humans are very dependent on each other, way more so than horses. You don't see foals relying on their dams for 16 years or more at a time, and most kids are completely reliant on their parents for longer than that. Humans also live together and we rely heavily on each other. We help each other out. We form very strong bonds. We see each other every day, oftentimes for many, many hours of the day. Whereas you don't see your horse freaking out when you go into the house for the day or go have a snack. They care more about being with their friends, aka other horses, than they do with you. They rely on that more. They get more comfort from that, even though they might get some from you. Socializing with other horses is definitely more important for their health than it is to socialize with humans. So anyways, comparing horses to children, this is not a real comparison. If you use this, it shows an incredible lack of understanding for what type of relationship you have with your horse and what type of relationship humans have with their children. Even in the case of strong human bonds, humans adapt too, and they have a way higher emotional understanding and dependency than horses would with humans. People get their hearts broken. They can be flat out head over heels in love with someone for years at a time, and then they can still adjust and move on and learn to be happy without that person in their lives. These types of relationships go way, way deeper than what anyone would have with their horse. If people can adjust to getting over someone that they've been in love with, especially for a long period of time, with their greater understanding of the end of a relationship and what has truly happened, then horses can too. The fact of the matter is that we need to support responsible sellers. I've sold a lot of horses, most of which that I bought with the intention of selling because I retrain them, thoroughbreds off the track, and other types of green horses that aren't necessarily super marketable to the types of people that want a long-term horse. They leave my hands far more marketable than they were when I got them, which means they're more likely to find a long-term home than they would have been before, because not everyone wants to train a super green horse, and that's fine. Many of the horses that I've sold are still in the same homes that I sold them 2 years ago, and they're very happy and well cared for. They're all fat and they're all healthy. I don't think what I've done is a bad thing because they're still cared for exceptionally well, and they're very loved in their new homes. I have never ever noticed any of these horses being in distress in a new home other than the adjustment period of being on a new property, which is the same thing with taking them to shows and whatnot. It's just about finding a good situation for the horse and ensuring that any individual needs are met, and then they should be happy. People need to get off their high horses and make sure that they're caring for their own horses well and to the best of their ability. I'd rather see a horse sold to a suitable home than isolated to a stall for years at a time or unable to socialize properly with other horses. These basic aspects of care are far more important to the health and happiness of your horse than it is to stay with the same person caring for them for their entire life. Responsible selling is not bad. If you actually encourage people to forego university and other very important life-changing things to keep their horse, then you're not living in reality whatsoever. Most people with this type of anti-selling attitude either do not own a horse or have never seen themselves in a position where they would need to consider selling them yet. And that's fine, but if you have not been in that position where you've needed to consider it, and if you have not been in the person's shoes that you're critiquing, then you have no right to say that they should keep their horse, because you have no idea what led to the decisions and what exactly their financial and time constraints are, or even if it's just upgrading to a new horse. You have no idea. You're not in the place to judge. Needs change, life situations change. Horses are very expensive, and if you're spending that much money on them, it's not a bad thing to sell your super well-broke horse to a kid or a beginning rider that will be able to get way more out of them than you can anymore once you've moved up and progressed. And then you go and buy a horse that's more suited for you if you're going to be funneling thousands of dollars a year into them. I think that's acceptable so long as you find them a good home. Horses will adapt and adjust to a new home so long as you find something that's suited to their individual needs. I promise you this, they will adapt. We've made them to adapt to things that are far worse for their health, like stalling for extended periods of time. This isn't to say that you shouldn't be responsible when buying and take things into consideration so that you don't get an unsuitable horse that you'll need to sell very quickly, but selling shouldn't be condemned. There are various reasons why people might come to the decision of selling their horse. Like in my case, I oftentimes get really green horses and I retrain them and sell them. Selling allows people to get horses with experience and training that they otherwise might not have had if they had not spent years with the owner that they had previously. So this is just very important because a lot of times when people are looking for well-broke horses, the reason why they're well-broke is because they've been through a few owners or spent years with a certain owner perfecting these certain aspects of training, and then they're okay and safe enough for beginning riders. Without selling, we wouldn't have the same amount of suitable broke horses. Selling isn't a bad thing. You're giving someone else the opportunity to enjoy your horse, and you're giving your horse the opportunity for someone to love it or spend more time with it than you would have been able to do at a certain point in your life. May it be because you got them as a resale project and weren't intending to keep them, or may it be because you're going to school and can't afford to keep your horse and cannot afford the time that you need to spend with said horse. You're giving your horse the opportunity to be given more than what you can currently offer them, or to be in a better care situation than what you can currently offer, or you're giving someone else the opportunity to learn and grow with that horse when you've outgrown them. That is what is important, is responsible selling. Selling is not the bad thing. It's irresponsible people who just pawn their horses off on other people and just sell willy-nilly without considering where the horse is going. Please do not hate on people for selling their horses and guilt them, because oftentimes it's hard enough as it is, especially when you've had the horse for years. I know when I sold my horse, that was my heart horse at the time. His name was Dallas. He was a black thoroughbred gelding. I did not want to sell him, but he was a pasture pet and he simply was not happy in the situation we had him in, and I didn't have a place that would be the right situation for him unless I sent him way far away. At the time, I couldn't find a place, and now he's still in the same home like 3 or 4 years later, and he's fat, he's happy, he gets to be out on a huge acreage with one other horse on a very quiet farm property where the people live on property and see him every day. He has a way better life than what I could have possibly offered him at the time. It was way better for him and in his best interest, even though it really sucked for me, and even though it resulted in him being taken away from me.